All right, it is 6 o'clock right on the dot. I like to get started right as the top of the hour. Give folks a chance to jump in, jump on. For those of you who are joining us, thank you. Welcome to our March welcome gathering for the California Working Families Party. My name is Aiden, as you can see here on the screen. I am the California organizer. I am statewide organizer for WFP here in California. If you can read my email, it is right there underneath my title. But again, my name is Aiden Rodriguez Swanson. I use he, him pronouns. I will be the host this evening for you all, so thank you for joining us this evening. I'm going to give a couple seconds for folks to hop in. I know some folks aren't always super punctual, but for the chat is going to be set to subscriber only mode right now. It's one of the ways we can keep those who are less friendly out of these spaces, so we are able to communicate and talk with one another. So if you are not yet, you can subscribe in to our page and chat as you want. I always love to hear where folks are joining us from. I myself am based in the Bay Area, the South Bay in particular, but I always love to hear where folks are joining from across the state. Again, there's no need to introduce yourself if you're just interested in just listening in right now. But I always encourage folks to say where they're joining from. I mean, we have folks all around the state joining in, as well as folks sometimes from outside of the state who like to join these welcome gatherings. Again, this is the welcome gathering for the California Working Families Party. You may have attended one of the national ones or just interested in general in our work, but I will go through everything that you need to be a part of the Working Families Party here. So first things first, I always like to kind of set some ground rules for these kinds of events. These big three, in particular, community agreements, I'll go through them one by one. So take space and make space. This basically means if you are someone who is chatty often, who likes to talk about a bunch of things, maybe take a step back. And if you're someone who's a little bit more shy, who doesn't often engage with these kinds of events, that's totally fine. Maybe this is a chance for you to kind of step outside of your box and really introduce yourself, chat, ask questions. There's no dumb questions, but I always encourage folks to ask anything that they think is useful for here. And again, this is a welcoming space. Introduce yourself, say hi, anything like that, as well as ask any questions that come up along the way. It's super important for folks. The next thing, what happens here stays here, what is learned here leaves here. So anytime that folks talk about things, their own personal experiences, their experiences out in the world, let them leave that there. And then what is learned, though, like the messages and the goals and the things that we all learn together from one another and from this presentation, these are things that you can bring with you as you go back out into the world. And then kind of related to sharing experiences and everything, speak from your own experience using I statements. So don't say, oh, this is how something is. Like, oh, I believe that this is how we should change things, or I believe that we should have done X, Y, and Z. This helps ground us in being able to have conversations without feeling like we're attacking one another. It's easy to say and disagree on things, but to really talk about, oh, this is something that I believe, it opens it up to conversation where folks can say, oh, this is where we see our differences, and this is how we can get engaged there. So again, these are the big three community agreements I always like to emphasize. And as always, if there are others that come up and you have questions about, or you think that's something we should all agree on, please be sure to add them in the chat. I mean, introductions, whatever you need to do. This is a space for all of us, not just me because I'm the speaker, not just because I'm part of the party. It's a space for everybody, and I really hope everyone can utilize this space as a way to get to know one another and get to know about the party. So with that kind of set there, I will really jump into what it is that we do. There's a lot that goes on about us as a party. One of the big things that I think we really need to emphasize is what our theory of change is and how that differentiates us from other groups or other entities that interact and act in this space. So this right here is our North Star. North Star being the guiding principle, the guiding idea that we use to what we work toward, essentially. And so I'll read it out loud here for folks. To build a multiracial, feminist, working people's political party of the American left that wins governing power to enact a structural reform agenda to save the planet and all the people on it. Now, there are a couple things here that I always love to emphasize. It really lays out clear-cut who we are building. Who are we building around? Multiracial, feminist, working people's political party. That's a lot in one thing. It's easy for us to say, oh, we are part of the American left or whatever. This is a really good opportunity for us to build out all the different things that we are working towards. And one of the big things is, how do we use this power? It's not just enough to be like, oh, we're fighting the power all the time. The goal in mind is to win governing power to enact structural reform, to enact these structural changes. So it's not enough to be like, oh, we are always going to be the underdogs. That won't get us to where we need to get. We need to get to a position and a place where we, as a multiracial, feminist, working people's political party, can really make these changes, and that's through governing power. One thing I do want to mention is this is just one of the avenues to which people can make change. We are not saying this is the end-all be-all. This is stuff that we can work towards, and this is the avenue that we are taking here. And again, the last piece here is save the planet and all the people on it. There are a lot of things here that really can define what we're doing. Save the planet, there are a lot of ways this can show up, whether it's just climate change, the folks, the way that we interact with the planet, not just like undoing the harm that capitalism has done, but how do we build from there? How do we continue sustaining and building out a future for all of us? And the other piece is all the people on it. It's not like, oh, we're just going to stick to our own, and that's it. This is everybody. It's not just, oh, we're thinking of folks just in the US, or just in the Western Hemisphere, or just in the West, as people like to say. This is to save everybody, and there are a lot of ways that we can do this. So this is kind of where we see things. And welcome from Berkeley. Hello, Bay Area neighbor. Glad you can join us. So let's kind of jump into what we see as the four main struggles here in the United States. Some of these are a little more applicable to the United States as a whole rather than just California, but in general, these really help define what we see as the big main issues. First and foremost, something that's at the front of mind for a lot of folks, especially with this presidential election year, is the authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the GOP. Not surprising to anyone who has followed news in the last basically decade, and then the historical context for it all too. We are seeing it show up in a lot of different forms, and I'll kind of go into that in a second, but that is one of the main struggles we see. The second thing, and the reason that we kind of exist as the Working Families Party and not just kind of a faction, is that we see the Democratic Party is controlled by wealthy and corporate forces. You see with the endorsements that they do, with some of the legislation that they choose to pass and not pass, candidates they support, candidates that are incumbents that they continue to support despite having bad track records, all of these different things to really not hold and give space to working class folks within their policy programs. The next thing being Democrats losing working class people of all races. I'll show a slide in a couple minutes here about like how drastic this is looking, but one of the narratives that we've heard over the last decade or so has definitely been, oh, we're seeing Democrats losing white working class voters. Yes, and I think that is part of it, and that was definitely a big thing a little whiles back, But now we're seeing that Democrats are losing working class people of all races. So this is not just this is a white voter thing, or this is a white population thing. This is becoming a larger trend that we're seeing across the board here. And welcome, Laura from Denver. Next thing and final piece here is the two-party system limits our room to maneuver. So these are really the main four pieces that we see as the struggles that we want to tackle. So first and foremost, authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the GOP. This, again, is going to be a little bit of a repetition for folks who are aware of this, but we are seeing the party of Donald Trump shifting outside of just him to the larger party of white nationalism. It is posing a clear and present danger to a large amount of communities. It's not just, globally at this point, for what their goals are. But the way this authoritarianism is showing up is the incitements of racial violence, attacking quote-unquote wokeness that we see, restricting what decisions can be made about our bodies. I mean, Roe v. Wade, this has been a long time coming for the Republican Party and what they've wanted to undermine. Rising theocracy, so this is really integrating and dissolving the separation of church and state piece that shows up to help safeguard us from those things. Open and brazen attacks on democracy, undermining the importance of it, saying it's bad, attacking the systems for which we elect folks. Violence against places, libraries, bars that host drag shows, and passing laws to erase an entire group of people. So there's a lot of things here that we see show up as how the authoritarian white nationalist takeover is showing up in just different facets on the federal level, locally, and just on communities taking action for themselves. The next piece, again, is the corporate and wealthy control of the Democratic Party. This is how we really start to begin to differentiate ourselves and why we show up for folks. So on paper, the Democratic Party likes to say a lot of the right things. They like to really hone in on the social issues for the most part, of like, we defend basic rights, we are doing X, Y, and Z. And then when you get into the economic stuff, this is where things tend to fall apart in how they really push for change. It normalizes the status quo of this capitalist system that we live in here in America. It maintains a electoral system that really benefits them. I mean, from who gets to run for office, the amount of money spent on these things, outside influence, lobbying, a bunch of different things that they can change, especially in states like California, but then choose not to. And then the economic and tax system, for which they, again, some within the party, of course, are changing this and hope to change this. But as a whole, it hasn't quite panned out that way. Why this is a problem, I will cover that as we go through this evening. So I'm just keep that in mind for as we go through here. So this next piece is really how we exist in this space. Two-party system, I mean, this has been an ongoing issue for the longest time here in America. Obviously, third parties are not new to the US, not new to the electoral system, but all of them kind of face the same struggle here of the two-party system limits our room to maneuver. We run into the spoiler problem of, maybe we could take away votes from the Democrat and then let a Republican or a conservative, in any case, take a seat. The practice of strategic voting, of like, voting for the lesser of two evils, something that we often hear about in presidential elections. And then swing voters. Swing voters typically are more affluent, older, and more conservative and white, typically. And so prioritizing these folks really ignores a large chunk of the population that needs to have their voice heard, is overlooked, and really faces the repercussions of all of the things that I've mentioned before, of like Democratic Party being controlled by corporate and wealthy forces, authoritarian white nationalist takeover of stuff. So again, these are some of the big things that we're seeing. And how do we see this piece happen of the Democrats losing working class people of all races? So this came up in a couple of different ways. Voters in Democratic strongholds deciding not to vote. For whatever party, Democrats or Republican, they just choose not to vote. They opt out because they see the system as something that does not support their values in terms of economic issues. Again, one of the issues that we're seeing with the Democratic Party being controlled by wealth and corporate forces is that you become more and more detached from the needs of everyday Americans. One of the shifts we saw was the Obama to Trump voters, folks that were diehard Obama fans, then like seeing Trump as the best option between the two in that previous 2016 election. And then people ignoring politics altogether and checking out. Once someone is checked out of politics, it is typically because they see the system as not benefiting them in any capacity because their voice is not heard. And so to really emphasize how the Democrats are losing working class people of all races, I actually saw this earlier today, and it really, 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 really emphasizes and highlights this issue pretty clearly here. So the income divide in terms of US politics and party registration and how folks are leaning, this really shows how this issue is showing up here. The blue line here is the poorest third of Americans. The red line is the richest third, and that gray line in the middle is about the middle third. So when we typically think of working class, we think of the folks that are in that blue section. We've seen a very stark shift, in post 2008, as you can kind of see there, of where folks are flipping in terms of registration across all the different income groups. A lot of working class folks shifting Republican, a lot of rich folks shifting Democrat. Again, really underlying the issue of this being something that we are seeing across the board here. So when people think of a political party, this is typically what they think, especially when it comes to a third party. You have the Democrats, you have the Republicans, and you have a spoiler party, typically is how they view things. But we like to shift the framing a bit of how things actually look for us as a political party. So putting it very simply, a political party is these four things, as we like to say. The first is people organizing together to do elections, 3, around a platform, and finally governed by a clear ideology. So it's not enough to be like, oh, we are a party, ta-da, vote for us. It requires a lot of infrastructure to build these things out. It requires a lot of intention. It requires a lot of being intentional and specific about what it is that we are trying to do. It's not enough to be like, oh, we are a party because we support an ideology. We support an ideology, and then how do we get it into the governing structure? And this is basically another version of our North Star. I can never do as great a job as our National Director, Maurice Mitchell, could in saying this, but this is basically, I'll read it out here for folks. In order to build the world we need, we have to dismantle racism and sexism. We need to build an economy that puts people on the planet ahead of profit. To accomplish any of this, we need a political revolution that will transform our government by taking power from billionaires and warmongers and putting it in the hands of the majority of Americans. So this really underlines that we know who we want to support, and we want to be making governing power decisions. So this is one of those places that is intentional about who we know as the folks that are on our side, and then folks that we are trying to get out of the decision-making process. So what does this look like in California? California is notoriously, quote unquote, blue. We are seen as a liberal stronghold. We're seen as super democratic. if you paid attention to this recent primary, or you've kind of looked at things more recently, you'll know that this isn't quite how things show up here in the state. So this is the typical, especially this one here on the left, the 2020 general election is how folks typically think of California. Majority blue, super little sparse areas of red, especially in the north and the Central Valley, but for the most part blue. However, that same election, we had Prop 15. Prop 15 was a progressive ballot measure for statewide rent control. It looks very different in terms of how the votes turned out. Red in the case of the Prop 15 vote being no's, blues being yeses. What areas that were blue for a general election, it didn't translate down lower. So what we're seeing here is just because there is a plethora of folks who vote Democratic in a presidential election, it doesn't translate to things below that. And that's one of the issues that we are facing here in California, and one of the reasons that we organize here. It's like, okay, folks are already pretty Democrat for the larger sense, but when it comes down to local and statewide policies, things can be shifted to really enact things. So what does this look like for California? Like, how do we tackle this as the Working Families Party here? It's a massive state, millions and millions of folks. What's the best way to approach this? So we are composed and comprised of 3 pillars as our governing body. We are made up of statewide labor unions, statewide community C4s, and regional charters. So each of these hold the steering committee up as a pillar. A third, a third, a third. That is how California as a complete entity is built up for the governing body. This does not include staff, so staff doesn't make these decisions when it comes to the steering committee. We help facilitate things, but we are not a part of that. But it's not enough in California to just be like, okay, you know what, statewide, that's all we need. We are a massive state, like I said, so we figured it was best to break things apart into 7 regional charters, the 7 being the Bay Area, Central Coast, Central Valley, LA County, Orange County, the Inland Empire, and San Diego. So each of these then have their own regional charters. And these regional charters are made up of similar pieces to how the statewide governing body is. We have labor unions that operate in that region. We have community C4s that operate in that region. And then we have individual members. So these are the dues-paying members here within California in those areas that can then become member reps in their regional area. So another thing that folks might not be familiar with is, because we are the Working Families Party, they think of staff as the only piece of this. But here, when it comes to the governing bodies, we are made up of more than just staff. You actually don't even see staff listed here when it comes down to all the different pieces. So who we are in terms of the organizations that are part of us, all of these folks here, I'm not going to read them all out. This is on our website if you're interested in seeing who in different regions are a part of WFP. But these are the statewide organizations here listed. And then we also have them broken down to regional and local organizations. So some folks are statewide and regional, some are just local, some are just statewide. So all of these different pieces play a part in how we enact governing power within WFP. Because we are a massive state, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, all of these pieces are important for us here to get things passed. So what do we see for 2024? I mean, we are already past our primary. We are still have the November general election ahead of us. There is a lot for us to do ahead of that, and we kind of set aside some strategic directions on what we found to be our likeliest chance of success, based upon our capacity to do so, the conditions on the ground, all of those different things kind of playing a role here. So these big 3, and no one's going to be quizzed on this, and this is just more information for who are interested in how our electoral decisions and strategic directions look for this year. Expand the state legislative squad in a couple of key races, 4 to 5 key races. I will again explain what this means and looks like in a couple of slides here. Focus on pipeline development for local races, board of supervisors, municipal school boards. We see that a lot of folks don't have the support they need when they run for office. They go to the party, the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party will be like, oh, you need this consultant, you need these 10 million mailers, a bunch of things that institutionally benefit them and benefit the consultants that they're close with. However, it doesn't actually get progressives who need more than just that into office. So we can fill that role by supporting these folks and really enabling them to win and then keep their seats once they're up for re-election. And then working with the federal team to take back some of the congressional swing seats here in California, and then hopefully expand progressives in Congress. So we have things on like 3 different levels: a statewide approach to it, a focus on smaller races to build out the infrastructure, and then things on the federal level to take back Congress and the House of Representatives. This next piece then kind of goes into that statewide focus, and there's a reason that it's actually number 1 listed here. And that's because there's a lot that we can do with the state legislature. Again, I will explain what this slide looks like. I know it's all over the place in terms of graphics and arrows and all that stuff and names, but we can do a lot here in California. California, the state legislature here in California, we pass many more times bills than the federal government does. We can pass a lot more progressive legislation than the federal government does. People think of like, oh, you know, we have California, we're super progressive. Yes, we are to some extent, and yes, the media kind of likes to spin things a certain way. But when you really look down at the numbers, like the hard numbers of like how many folks are actually progressive versus how many folks are liberal, how many folks are corporate Dems, things are not as favorable for us for these things. So in total in the assembly, there are 80 seats. You need 41 votes for a majority, and then you need 53 votes. 53 votes needed for a 2/3 supermajority. So in order to pass a lot of the legislation, we need to expand outside of the 24 progressives and 10 liberals that we have that only gets us to about 34 votes. So aside from that, we need to then not only defend these individuals and say, hey, these are folks that we need to keep in office. We also need to like take away some of these 28 corporate Dem seats and make sure that they move to, at minimum, liberal, and then if not, progressive, so we can expand that group. So that's one of the reasons that some of these names are highlighted differently here. All of these 24 are listed as progressive in a broad sense. This is not a clear cut, oh, this person is 100% progressive. A better indicator of that is the purple highlighted folks. These are folks that we have screened, that we have endorsed, and folks that we see as actual champions of WFP in the state legislature. Green means that these are open seats this year. For those of you who do not know, the state assembly here in California, they like Congress, have to run every 2 years. We are right now in the middle of a large shift in folks moving on to other seats, whether they have termed out or they're choosing to run for another seat in Congress or locally. We have a lot of seats opening up to bring in another batch of progressives here. But again, we are seeing that there are still a lot of 28 corporate Dems. That is a sizable amount of folks that can and normally do undermine the progressive legislation that we are trying to pass. So you can see that we have made some progress, but there's much more that we need to do here as well. And things unfortunately look a little less favorable in the California Senate. The Governor Newsom at the top and the chair, the majority chair for the Senate is very neoliberal. We have 18 corporate Dems here in the Senate, to the 10 progressives, again, largely quotation mark progressives, and 4 liberal Dems. So that is the 14 of the 21 needed for a majority versus the 18 corporate Dems that we are up against, plus the 8 Republicans that will largely never support anything that progressives are trying to pass. Again, purple being the ones that we have as the folks that we've endorsed, green being open seats, and then the black normal stuff is folks that just fit into that broad progressive definition here. The next, and again, if folks have questions along the way, feel free to stop me. I sometimes use acronyms. I sometimes just gloss over things that might be important. If you have questions, again, please feel free to ask. I am here to help provide information for folks as they see needed. So where are we in terms of actually accomplishing the goal that we set out to for this year? These here on the left side, starting with Aisha Wahab in Senate District 10, all the way through Tina McKinnon in Assembly District 61. All of those folks are currently our squad member in the state legislature. And the 2 on the right side, Sasha Renee Perez in Senate District 25 and Shadeh El-Hawari in Assembly District 57, both of them have made it past the primary, actually as well as Marisol Rubio in the in Senate District 9, I believe, in the Bay Area. So that's another one that made it past the primary into the November general election. But again, these are not all the folks that we are going to endorse for November. There might be more as it comes up and as we decide to host screenings and such. But these are some of the squad members that we have. Again, really diehard champions for working families, and we have a close relationship with them as the WFP. So speaking of elections and who made it through and who did not make it through, we actually are hosting the election recaps in the next couple of weeks. I believe the first one is going to be, the first one is tomorrow in LA with LA Forward. That is not only an election recap, but is also a trivia night. So if you are interested at all for any of the events that come up, anything I mentioned should be up on our Mobilize. You can do !events in the chat, and it'll give the link to our Mobilize page so you can click, join anything you want. We are having the statewide virtual recap on next Monday, actually a week from today exactly, with some of our other additional guest speakers and the rest of the staff as well. So we can cover how everything's going to look and how everything looked in the state, and as well as how things look for November as well. So again, !events, all the events should show up on the Mobilize page. As I mentioned as well, we want to support and really do everything we can to allow progressives to win office. And one of the things that we do is campaign camps. And so this last fall, we actually hosted for the first time in-person campaign camps here in California. We had Hugo Soto Martinez in LA, and then Lisette Espinosa Garnica of Redwood City in the Bay Area. This is a great opportunity for folks who are interested in campaign camp in general, and campaigns, in whether running for office, whether they want to be on a staffer for a campaign, whether they are just interested in how campaigns work. Myself and a couple other staffers lead these trainings. I myself love campaigns. It's crazy, I know, but we do like to make things accessible for folks. So if there's any in your area that you want to have and you think there's an appetite for, please feel free to reach out to me. I would be happy to see what it looks like on the ground, and then we can get things set up in doing in-person campaign camps in your area. And we also know that folks can't do things in person, whether because of illness or because of distance to a location. So we also have virtual trainings as well. So 2 of the recent ones that we had last fall are for campaign fundraising, something that if you know a candidate or you've been a candidate yourself, everyone hates, but is necessary to fund your operations. and then how to actually conduct a phone bank and door knocking program. It's not enough to be like, okay, we're going to knock doors, we're going to call voters. There's a whole process to it. There's a process to keep volunteers engaged and all that. So all of these things really play into being prepared to run for office or supporting someone who runs for office. Moving on, as I mentioned, it's, again, we are seeing really some big attacks against progressives here in California, and we're seeing the weaponizing of the recall process. Everyone is largely familiar with the recall attempt of Governor Gavin Newsom 2 years ago now. I don't even remember. I've lost track of time. But we've seen the recent attempt of trying to recall Governor Newsom. We saw recently in Santa Ana in Orange County the attempt to recall one of our first actually endorsed candidates in the city of Santa Ana, Jessie Lopez. She would not cater and bow down to the police association in her area, so they launched a recall attempt, forced it to a special election, and thankfully last November we were able to beat back that recall. So it takes a lot to beat back these recalls. Again, it's money, it's time, it's volunteer effort, and all the opposing side has to do is throw tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to force someone out of office. So these are things that we're seeing up and down across the state, and it's not enough to just say, hey, we're going to support you during an election. We support folks and make sure that they stay in office after they face recalls. Another thing, again, we like to highlight the work our electeds do. I mean, it's not enough to just be like, okay, see you in 4 years or 2 years. We like to emphasize and highlight the work that our electeds are doing. Two of the examples pictured here in the top left is with Fu Zhang in Merced, and then Lisette Espinosa Garnica in Redwood City, both talking about issues related to their communities. It's really great to actually hear folks know who their local council member is. It's great to see all the things that they can talk to about the council member now that the council member is available to them. It's like there to be like, hey, I know what your issues are like. Let's talk about it. What can we do to support you? And then at the same time, it's not all just work, work, work. We like to do socials as well. So similar to kind of this event tonight where it's just talking and interacting with folks, socials are in different areas, different cities where we can just meet for dinner and meet for drinks, coffee, whatever it is, and really just get to know one another. No obligation to do anything. It's not a volunteer. There's no surprise phone bank. You get free food, you get free drinks, nothing more you can ask for. So again, all of those will be on Mobilize. The link will be as they show up in Mobilize there. Next thing we have is, this will come up in the next coming month more as we endorse legislation for this cycle, but we like to talk about some of the legislation that we can pass on the statewide level. Assemblymember Alex Lee, who is one of our WFP champions and one of the first folks that we actually endorsed in our squad, was talking about when at this time taxing the ultra wealthy with a wealth tax. So this is one of the issues that we're focusing on. All of these things are pieces that we can really get hopefully more traction on as we elect more progressives into office. Again, all of this will show up on our Mobilize if you want to click the link as things come up. In some of the other areas, we also do congressional actions against the Republicans. It's not enough to say, okay, corporate Dems, you're our sole target. We understand that Republicans still pose a threat and have control, especially in areas like the Central Valley. So we like to really rub it in their faces of like, hey, you're not supporting working families. We show up at district office, we show up at fundraisers, all of these things to really remind folks that they are not supporting their constituents well. And then relating to congressional stuff, we also have, we were doing December of last year and then we're hoping to revive this again shortly. We were doing ceasefire phone banks. So we did one calling for ceasefires to the congressional representatives, as well as it was being talked about, the funding for more military aid, unrestricted military aid to Israel amidst the bombings in Gaza. So again, we are focused on a bunch of things all at the same time, but all of these things are equally as important to getting to our goals of supporting a world and building a world that allows all of us to thrive, not just kind of live. And sometimes that is the bare minimum that we are fighting for, enabling folks to continue to live in decency. And the thriving piece comes with more time. But then let's kind of just jump into who our staff is, like who's actually in charge of all this stuff. The three folks that we have here are basically some more like the leaders of the party within California WFP and staff side. We have Jane Kim. For those of you who are familiar, she was a elected official in San Francisco for a while. She is our California statewide director, our first California statewide director. And then we have Jorge Contreras, who is the senior, actually no longer just senior campaign manager, he is the deputy state director here in California. And then we have Adam Gold, who is the senior federal affairs strategist, so he helps focus on congressional actions and anything that has to do with kind of taking back Congress. And then when it comes to the organizers, we have now, I can't do math, 7 of us. There are 7 of us now. These are all of us, and you can see the areas that we all represent. Alicia Crater is the East Bay. She also does social media, so if you see any fantastic graphics on our social media, know that Alicia was responsible for them. I myself am based in the South Bay, but I am the statewide organizer. James Coleman, who is also the mayor of South San Francisco, is in charge of the peninsula in San Francisco in the Bay Area. Neil Sanapa is in charge of Sacramento, Central Valley, and Central Coast. Laura Wing is OC in IE, Orange County, and the Inland Empire. Hannah Kessel is this county of Los Angeles. And as of today, Becca Rose of San Diego will be helping out there and will be helping out with communications as well. So this is our full team. You can chat with any of us at any time. I think I'd linked treat it correctly. Maybe not. But you should, yeah, it is. So on our link tree, you can set up meetings with any of us at any time you want to. You can also just DM us on anything. The other thing I would actually suggest is if you're interested in continuing to build with us or just interested in hearing what we do throughout the year and throughout the weeks, joining the Discord. If you are unfamiliar with Discord, it is basically a cooler version of Slack, if you're familiar with that. It's a great way to kind of stay in touch with any of us. We are having a statewide chat, like an actual conversation with our state director on Discord tomorrow. So if you want to hear directly from Jane Kim, ask her questions, just hear what she has to say, Discord's the place. That is going to be tomorrow evening. For those of you interested in that, I will also be there as well, so you can say hi to me again there. And that one can be more conversational for folks. And the last thing I would say is we are a membership-driven organization. We really don't have the money that the Democratic Party likes to flaunt, and definitely not the Republican-backed money. So the way we sustain our work is with dues-paying members here in the state of California or just anywhere who support the work. It allows us to continuing support of the electeds, train up new organizers, train up new campaigns and campaign staffers and candidates. So if you are at all able, you can become a member of California WFP. This also allows you to become a member rep. It gives you the option to become a member rep where you can vote on endorsements for anything in your region, whether it is for legislation that is in a city, candidates, anything that comes before your regional steering committee. member reps have the opportunity to vote there. So if you are willing and able, any recurring donation qualifies you to be a dues-paying member. So $10 is typically the minimum, but if you are only able to do $1 a month, that's all that is necessary. And then I believe everyone should be getting a welcome pack when they sign up to become a dues-paying member for the first time. So you get like a bunch of swag and stuff, if you so choose, mailed to you that you can use for things. With that, I have been talking for a little bit now. I want to open it up to if anyone has questions, if I glossed over anything that people want me to circle back on. This technically goes till 7, but if folks don't have any other questions, we can end early. But I just wanted to give space for folks who might have questions, might have comments that they want to share. Again, doesn't have to just be related to what I talked about here. There's a plethora of things that we could talk about, and I'm happy to answer about if I can. But I do want to thank everyone who has joined us this evening. I hope you were able to learn a lot. If you are new to the space, if you are returning, I hope this was a nice refresher. But I'll stick around for another minute or two, depending on if folks continue to have questions. I'm always happy to chat with folks. Actually, I will also drop my email in the chat, so folks, if anyone wants to email me at any point about anything, questions about the stuff on the slide, they're too shy to bring stuff up now, again, feel free to shoot me an email. I will be sending out a recording of this to folks this evening, depending on how quickly this uploads up to YouTube. So if you know folks that are interested in any of the stuff I talked about, or this would be something useful to share with folks, you are more than welcome to share anything that I shared tonight. The links, my email, the recording of this. Again, try not to just completely blast it out. It is easy for trolls to kind of stumble upon these things, but if you want to share it to social media, you are more than welcome to. We'll never stop you from sharing stuff there. I'll give it about another minute or two. I want to make sure folks have the chance to message anything if they want to. I hope everyone who was engaged in interacting with campaigns has had a little bit of a chance to rest. I know it's been less than a week, so in addition to the daylight savings, I am still catching up on sleep, and I hope everyone is doing all right with the time change and taking care of themselves. All right, well, hearing and seeing nothing else from folks, again, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. Please don't feel shy about asking any questions. If you want to email me or anything, you have my email. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.